master's project at Georgia Tech. So I've always had difficulty settling on one interest area. It's the reason I did mechanical engineering and feel at home in human-computer interaction. The principles of these two fields are applicable to such a wide range of problems experienced by people. I could never turn away from interesting questions, problems, and opportunities that were presented around me. That's how you end up with my master's project. Over the past 2 years, I've cultivated an interest in information visualization. Of course, coming from a background of physical design, I started to define a niche area to explore this for my thesis. How can one build effective, real-world physical information visualizations? I soon after decided that I wanted to add a social angle to the project. I believed that working on something solely out of passion was somewhat dangerous for a long-term project. Instead, adding deeper purpose to the project would help me continue my work at a high level throughout the process. I'd only been in Atlanta for about a year, but I was really growing to love the city. There was a healthy grassroots community of creatives in both the arts and technology. I started to become familiar with a lot of the social hot topics gaining steam around fall's election. I felt it was important to somehow contribute to the grassroots political movements born of the same people that made the city such a unique and vibrant hub. I didn't want my work to be fleeting. Establishing a project in a niche space of physical information visualization for social justice was daunting. I had to define my own design methodology. Fortunately, this space was not as unexplored as I thought. It was called experience design. To find an advisor, I was put in contact with an alumnus from Georgia Tech who worked at a design firm called Second Story. Second Story specializes in designing interactive environments through conveying compelling stories and manipulating space with technology. They show information and stories in fun, profound, and entertaining ways. The ultimate goal of this is to architect emotions in people to inspire positive action. Before I could move further, I had to find a group doing impactful outreach work. I started volunteering with different grassroots projects meeting activists, artists, and technologists trying to make the city a better place for everyone. Through my friend Maggie Kane, I was introduced to a group called the Madhousers. Founded in 1987, they specialize in building $500 shelters and giving them away at no cost to clients. I appreciated their focus on action rather than talk. Initially, they were an underground movement, hoping to influence social change. However, they are now a registered nonprofit. The Madhousers are organized and hold 3 regular volunteer events a month and have a regimented system of material procurement, construction, and deployment. In January, my main contact, Tracy Woodard, became the president of the organization and mandated expanding the mission to connecting clients with services beyond their shelters. While personal shelters are a major step to recovery for many of their clients, the nonprofit realizes that access to additional services like nurses, social workers, and mental health professionals are needed for more serious cases. So I started volunteering with the Madhousers to understand more about their process and build relationships with some volunteers and clients. Twice a month, they hold shelter builds on weekends, and once a month, they hold something called bucket burns, where they build their wood-burning stoves. Volunteering usually meant material and structural prep at their garage and then moving to a campsite to deploy. I also participated in a canvassing event where we sought out potential clients in high-density homeless areas. The experience of talking to people and hearing their stories and context was pretty impactful. The relevance of the problem and people resonate so much more when you look them in the eye and listen to what they tell you. This process of immersion allowed me to meet many people in and around the organization, including staff, volunteers, public health professionals, and past and potential future Madhousers clients. The relationships I cultivated would facilitate my official interviews. So during research, I spoke with dozens, interviewed over 20, and recorded 15 participants. The interview process was conducted with 4 separate research goals. Interviews with Madhousers clients were aimed at gathering life and time stories before and after Madhousers intervention. Interviews with student volunteers aimed to determine their intentions for volunteering and gauge how their experience was. Interviews with official representatives of the Madhousers aimed to capture their first exposure to the organization and what its needs and goals were. Finally, the primary set of interviews was aimed to determine insights from individuals who we hoped would volunteer their valuable skill sets to the Mad Housers. We wanted to determine what key factors would motivate these individuals to answer calls to service. So during my research synthesis, I uncovered consequential findings, insights, and stories from my interviews. I found that when clients lived in Mad Houser structures, there was quite a bit of work involved in maintaining their space and resources, especially in the winter months. However, their shelter and camps were invaluable staples of stability for safety for clients to allow them to work, sleep, and live with peace of mind. Interviews with volunteers highlighted the traditional building experience as a time-efficient but high-impact way to give back. It was also a hands-on learning experience. Speaking with the Mad Housers themselves, I learned of their difficulties coordinating with city authority figures, their resource channels, and more about their expanding mission to involve more public health professionals. Regarding the target group I'm designing to influence, motivations originated mostly from a sense of self. Some were empathy-based, as in individuals saw themselves and as not that different from the homeless in different circumstances. Others were role-based, so often the values and skills that were associated with an individual's career correlated highly with their desire to get out and help. Human connection was another factor. Often individuals who were professionals expressed a desire to connect with people outside of the invisible wall they felt existed at work. And others were environmental or based on the national conversation, particularly with younger participants that felt the climate and national conversation of politics motivated them to effect whatever change they could in their environment. So concepting is the current phase of my project. I'm taking the insights from user research and reconciling them with my goals of designing experiences to promote calls to action and increase participation with Mad Housers. I gathered a significant amount of media data during my interviews in the form of audio and photos. I also learned of some valuable census resources that I could use. The media and data is what I intend to actualize in my design. However, I have to tie the story I tell back to the user's sense of self based on findings from my research. Currently, I'm concepting 2 iterations of a story map-based interface. To tie my data and stories back to users, I want to attach audio data to sections of a city map that also presents GIS data on where the homeless are in town. The second iteration, I'm considering adding a mirror element to the map experience that will further connect the stories with the viewer's sense of self. My measurable KPI will be email sign up for volunteer events. I'm not anchored to these concepts, but I hope that they'll help illustrate how I've converted my insights to an actual social justice experience design specification. Thank you for your time.